It's great to have you all on board here, and we're looking forward to a discussion for Chris and for Bonnie to be telling us all about No Bullshit leadership. And there's lots of interest in the course and what it can do, but I think there's going to be some learnings just even from this session. So welcome to everybody, and I'm going to hand you over to Chris Hurst, who of course is the originator of the book No Bullshit Leadership, and Bonnie Alexander, who together with him put the course together. And Kimberly, thank you also for being part of this, as you're the person who makes it happen. Okay, so I'm going to take myself off camera and to hand over to Chris and to Bonnie to start talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johanna, and hello everybody. It's really, really lovely to see so many of you here. So I'm just going to take you through what we're going to be doing over the next 55 minutes, hour or so. And what we really want to do is give you a flavour of the course. So we're going to do a little bit of show and tell so you get a sense of what the course is like, because there's no better way to kind of see the course than to experience a little bit of what we do and how it runs. I'm also going to see if we can encourage you to do some audience participation in the chat or in real life if you want to come off mute. I want you to prepare your most challenging, or maybe not very challenging, but your leadership questions, please. And we'll try and come to some of those at the end so that we can do a little bit of a Q&A, which again mirrors part of what we do in the course, because we have different moments during the course where we interact with all the cohorts, and we have a live Q&A which Chris and I attend, and we talk about the themes that are resonating most strongly in the classroom, but also we respond to questions. So we'll try and give you a little flavour of that. I know time is limited, so we may only take a handful of questions, but please don't be shy. So please sit there thinking about your leadership questions, and we will come to that. So I'm going to give you, before we get into the sort of this is how the course runs, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and give you some of the feedback that we've received and you know what we've gleaned so far and who's done the course and who it's for and all that sort of thing. So we launched the course last year. In fact, this time last year, the course didn't exist. We filmed it in March. And we launched it in June of last year. That was our first cohort, and we had our second cohort starting in October. So to date, over 100 people have taken the course, and the feedback we have had has been, you know, really, really good on the one hand, but also really helpful on the other hand. So we've had feedback that's helped us fine-tune elements of the course or the marketing of the course so that we feel it's even stronger than ever. And our cohorts have come from agency world and sort of marketing kind of organizations or brands as well. So clients like, or brands like Direct Line, Channel 4, the BBC, the National Health Service, Virgin, Tesla. I mean, I could go on. In agency world, we've had all the networks. So Publicis, I know you're on the call. We've had Publicis there. We've had Omnicom, Uncommon, M&C Saatchi, and a load of independents as well. So there's been really, really good representation from our community in the UK. And we're hoping that we can do the same with your community in Africa. So that's really the aim for today. And 97% of the people we surveyed had come back with really, really positive feedback and feel that they would recommend the course, but also that they've benefited from it. So I've got a few quotes that I want to share with you. Some testimonials from people who took the course. So things like, this course has had a profound impact on my day-to-day, giving me newfound confidence in myself as a leader. The enlightening insights shared by Bonnie and Chris have shifted my perspective, and I now recognise the immense potential within myself to thrive as a leader. And another one, I'm absolutely loving it. Honestly, it couldn't be more clarifying and pertinent. I'm scribbling notes, rewinding to rewatch, and having 100 ideas a lesson. That's just a flavour of them. I might sprinkle some more in later, but I wanted to just give you a flavour of some of the feedback we've had. And one of the questions we get asked most often when we're, out and about talking about the course is who is it for? Where's it pitched at and who is it for? And I'm sure Chris will talk to you a little bit more about there are no leadership types, and many more of us are leaders than we think maybe are leaders. But really, this is anyone who has influence over other people, anyone who sees themselves as a leader, or maybe people who don't, but they maybe manage a team, however small. All of those people are the people we're looking at in the course. And this course is specifically designed to accelerate the development of, emerging leaders from C-suite down. We want people to see themselves more as leaders. So our early experience really tells us that it's kind of middle management and above that benefit from the course. People who I say are responsible for small teams or even bigger teams, and they want to develop their leadership skills. They want to develop their confidence. They want to unlock their potential and really grow into their own kind of leadership style. I'm going to pause there and maybe ask Chris to talk about his thoughts about leaders and why there isn't a leadership type.
Hi everybody, thanks Bonnie. Yeah, so I'll talk for a bit, Bonnie, and when you think that I should shut up, you tell me to shut up. So I suppose at heart, our fundamental, our kind of motivating passion, I suppose, is that we believe there is no leadership type. And I talk to people about leadership a lot. Spend a lot of time with people, standing in front of people, groups like this and others, talking about leadership. And in some ways, that of all the things we say to people about leadership, that's kind of, I think, for many people, one of the most shocking things, because we are told so repeatedly in all sorts of places, in the media and at work, we spend a lot of time talking about leadership types. And our fundamental belief is that there is no leadership type. And it's really important, I think, that because in some ways, if we convince ourselves, for me, it's like this sort of, I don't want to overemphasize this point, but for me, it's sort of almost a difference between mysticism and skills. The more that we convince ourselves that there's a leadership type, the more we build this mysticism around the subject of leadership, the more we convince ourselves that it's not something that we can learn, or it's not a skill that we can develop. It's actually just by some unknown hidden hand just makes some people better at it than others. And that is fundamentally bullshit. And it really inhibits I mean us as individuals, as well as us as collectives within organizations. It really inhibits our ability to fulfill our potential, our ability to fulfill our dreams to an extent. I mean, the ability to understand leadership and develop leadership skills is one of the most potent ways that we are able to have the kind of careers that we want. And of course, as a sort of a subset of that, but by no means less important than that, leadership is how we help others. I mean, that fundamentally, one way of understanding leadership is that it is, it's the environment that we create to enable others to achieve things they wouldn't otherwise achieve. So I think this idea that leadership, there is a leadership type, is more than just wrong. I think it actually inhibits us as individuals and us collectively from progressing and developing and fulfilling our potential. So therefore, we believe, and what the course is, we believe that leadership is a skill that we can learn and that we can develop. And I think that I think now about leadership, the sort of three dimensions, if you like, for leadership, all of which I think are relevant to us all, no matter who we are, and are relevant to why you might think about going on the course. The first dimension of leadership is the sort of obvious one, the one we always think about when we think about leadership, and that's sort of, if you like, in an organizational sense, downwards. Let's say, we're at the top, we have people working for us, and we are responsible for the performance of those people. What good leaders do is they enable the people that work for them to achieve things they wouldn't otherwise achieve. That I think that's a good way of thinking about what leadership is. But I think we can also think about leadership as upwards, and what it means upwards in an organizational sense, because for virtually everybody, no matter how senior we are, we have a boss. I'm sure all of you have a boss, or virtually all of you will have a boss, even if you are quite senior in your organization. I've been a CEO, Vonnie's been a CEO. I mean, Vonnie was a founder, so briefly, I suppose, didn't have a boss. But
I had
felt
business
like
partners. It's like having a boss when you've got business partners. It's the same,
yes,
same
exactly.
difference.
But it felt like it did. That's what I mean. So,
Yeah.
so we for most of us, we might be leaders, but we also have people responsible. We are responsible too. And I think what leadership is about, and understanding leadership is about enabling the people you work for to achieve things they wouldn't achieve if you weren't there. And that's quite an interesting thought, because what better way to become indispensable in an organization than to enable your boss to progress in their career. I mean, essentially, that's one of the ways we should think about what our roles in organizations are. So that's the second dimension. Dimension 1 downwards, dimension 2 upwards, and I think the third dimension is of leadership.
I've lost sound. Has anyone else lost sound?
Yeah, somebody.
Okay.
How long was that?
Okay.
Yeah, am I back? Yeah.
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so I'm not sure how.
So you've got another minute, and then I'm gonna.
Okay, 3 dimensions: dimension downwards, dimension upwards, and of course the dimension for ourselves, how we lead ourselves. And the one thing I'd say about this, to come back specifically to the training program, is I've worked in corporate organizations my whole career. I've been on training programs, and I've bought training programs, and I think a lot of training that we buy and go on in organizations really feels like something that we are doing. We are going on the training program on behalf of our employer. It's something that's sort of being done to us. And I think the beauty of this program and the beauty of leadership training is it's training for us. The better we understand leadership, the better careers we ourselves have. And that's what we want, and that's what our employers should want.
All right, I'm going to pick up from there. I said we wanted to give you a flavour of the course. That was a flavour of the course in a way. A lot of what we do in the course is Chris and I sit talking about leadership topics. I ask him a question, he answers. He asks me a question back. We go back and forth. So that's the bulk of the course. And then we have some fabulous guest speakers who come from a variety of industries and experiences, and they bring just an extra dimension to the leadership discussion or debate of that particular module. So there are 8 modules, and I'm going to give you again a little flavour of what those modules are. So for example, one of the modules is called The Leader's Journey. It's about working out, how you get sort of from A to B, what that is all about in terms of, moving you on your journey, and how you begin to understand, what effective leadership is about. The other one, there's another module which is all about being decisive. It's called To Decide is to Act. There is another module, in fact, there are 2 modules all around culture, and we're going to talk a little bit more about culture in a second. And then things like being followed or leading yourself, looking after yourself and leading yourself are such important component parts of leadership, and often forgotten, I might add, I think, often neglected. So there are 8 modules in the course, and because the course is online, you can learn at your own pace, and that's the beauty of it. So you can carve out some time in your week to do a module a week or whatever, and in 4 of those modules, there are assignments that we have set you, that we ask for you to submit in the classroom chat. And then a tutor will give you feedback on those assignments. So it's very interactive, very involved. And we encourage also some peer-to-peer feedback as part of that process, and some general discussion. So we get people to try and talk a little bit about the topics that are being aired. And alongside that, we have at 3 different points in the course, these live Q&As, which I alluded to earlier. So again, we'll go over in those Q&As what the recent topics have been, what the hot topics have been in the chats or in the assignments, and we'll bring those to life a little more and have a discussion with the people who are in the room. So, so that just gives you a bit of a flavour. I'm just going to give you a few more bits of feedback. So one person said, before this course, I would never have seen myself as a leader. And someone else said, it's been a really interesting and a confidence boost. I can now say I'm proud to be a leader. And we asked people to describe No Bullshit Leadership, the course, in 3 words. And these are some of the ones that came back. So powerful, purposeful, pleasing, fulfilling, great and varied, interesting, well presented, enjoyable, insightful, impactful, and practical. So that gives you that sort of overview. The reason this course exists is because there is a leadership gap in our industry in particular, and AAR wanted to help fill that gap as passionate advocates for this industry. And so that's really why the course came about. That's the whole raison d'etre of the course. So today I want us to focus on 2 areas. The first of these is talent and the relationship of talent to growth. Because Chris talks a lot about this in the course, and I want him to tell us a little bit more why he focuses so much on the relationship between talent and growth.
Well, I mean, I suppose, I think I'll take a step back from that, I suppose, and I think about when I first became a CEO of a business, and it was, to put it politely, a dog of a business, let's say that. There are more accurate and less polite descriptions, and it was about 200 people, I suppose, in the company then. And I remember standing in front of the company, and we weren't in denial. We knew we were a bit of a crappy business, but I remember standing up in front of the company and thinking, well, why? And it's, why are we a crappy business? We're just a building with people in it. That's all we are. We don't own the building even. And all of our competitors, we've got competitors 100 yards down the road, as I'm sure all of you do. Some of those are really, really good businesses. What is it that they have that we don't? And there's not a really complicated answer to that question. The conclusion I came to was there's just 2 things. The first is culture, and the other is talent, is people. And so essentially, all of our businesses, and certainly in marketing services, but by the way, I mean, I think you can make a case that all businesses really at heart are just talent and culture. And so the reason that our business was underperforming and the reason that other businesses were outperforming was because they had some kind of, alchemical mix of a more effective culture and, I suppose, better talent, better people. And I think as a leader, it's kind of good. There's good and bad news, I suppose, depending on, again, whether you're glass half full or glass half empty. There's actually not that many levers that really you can pull to make a difference, whether you're running a team of 4 people or you're running 40,000 people. The majority of the factors that influence your team, your business, your life, frankly, are outside your control. You can't control the weather or interest rates or, what's happening in the Red Sea or whatever it is. These things are beyond your control. What is always within your control, or at least, let's say, far more in your control, is the shaping of the culture, which I'm guessing we might come and talk about in a moment, and your ability, I suppose, as a leader to attract more than your fair share of the best people. Now, I think I once, at the risk of being indiscreet, I once had a job interview at Apple, and I met the HR person, and I gave them some version of this speech. And she said to me, well, and I said, so, in any business, you want to try and have more than your fair share of the best people. But I mean, no business is full of rock stars. It's impossible. I mean, it's impossible. I mean, maybe if you have a business of 10 people, but I mean, it's impossible beyond that. And I don't know how many people Apple employ, I don't know, 100,000 people or whatever more. She said, well, what if I told you that every single person we employ is a rock star? And I was like, I wouldn't believe you. Anyway, I didn't get the job, but I don't but I don't believe her. I mean, so our challenge as leaders is to get, is to say, how do we create an environment where we can get more than our fair share of the if you like, the best people. But I might stop actually, because I'm guessing you've asked me about culture, Vonnie, and I actually think, I think
I'm going to ask you something else first.
Okay, well,
I want you to tell him how you turned around. Go on.
I'll blurt my final sentences and you ask me that, because the reason I think talking about culture and talent together are so important is because it's actually, how you define who the right person is. I think right person is actually quite difficult, indeed perhaps not possible to do without also considering that in the context of culture. So
we are going to come to culture, because culture is one of the topics that is most lively in the discussions that we have. But you said something that I think is going to have piqued everyone's interest here. You said you were presiding over what you referred to as a dog of a business.
Yes.
I want to know what you did to turn that business around, because I know that you did turn that business around. So how did you do that?
I think the first thing that we did, which is easy with hindsight because I've said it, but it's not always easy at the time, by the way, when you're there and you're responsible, is to be honest with ourselves about the sort of state of the nation, let's say, is to be honest about the fact that we had big problems, and we were clear what those problems were. Now, all teams, all organizations, all businesses, most aren't as underperforming, let's say, as that. But they all have problems, challenges, difficulties all the time, even very high performing ones. All of your teams and businesses will have problems and challenges. The first thing with fixing any problem is you have to be honest about what the problem is. Understanding is the prelude to solving. Very often in business, very often in our lives, very often in our societies, let's say, we aren't honest about what the real problems are. Unless we're really honest about them, we're never going to fix them. So the first thing was we were brutally honest, let's say, about what we needed to do. And in essence, our strategy was our culture. The one sentence answer to your question, Vonnie, is our strategy was our culture. What we said was that we believed that if we could create a culture that enabled us to outperform our competitors, by definition, we would win. And so when people asked us, as we began on the journey, we began to make some progress, what's our strategy? We would say our strategy is our culture. And what we did really was we set out to be pretty iconoclastic. We said we've got, our business is a dog of a business, therefore we must have a dog of a culture. I mean, that's a sort of inevitable. So first of all, we have to smash that culture. So we set about smashing the culture. We called our culture, our new culture, if you like, open. If you Google open culture, now you will get literally billions. I mean, the last time I looked, it was more than 2 billion hits. That's not because of our open culture, by the way. Open culture isn't an idea we invented, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What we did though is we did it very well, basically. And the simplest way of describing it is we turned the normal organizational pyramid. If you can see my fingers, pyramid, you have people at the top, few people at the top, lots of people at the bottom. Information travels in one direction. Typically, in a hierarchical organization, it travels only downwards. People at the top telling people at the bottom what to do. And we basically set about turning that pyramid upside down. So we said the most important people in our organization are going to be the people who spend all of their working lives, or majority of their working lives, with their clients. We're going to build teams around our clients, and we're going to say to those teams, you know the client better than we're going to. You know what the solutions to those problems are going to be, and you need to find the answers to them. And what we are going to do as leaders and managers is we're not going to abdicate responsibility, so we're going to be involved, but we're going to try and think of our role as how do we coach, enable, encourage, remove barriers to you being able to do that. I could talk a long time about the culture we created, but in essence, that's what we set about doing, and we did lots of physical, tangible, actual things in order to get us there. I'll answer a second thing that we did, Vonnie, which I think is a question that we could all ask ourselves right now. You could ask yourself this question right now. So we said to ourselves, okay, we want to be the best. Okay, at the time it was preposterous. It was preposterous for us to aspire to be the best, but we said, okay, well, we want to be. And we said, well, okay, if we want to be the best, is there anything right now, today, that we are the best at?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer, unsurprisingly, to that question was no, there isn't anything. Of all the things that we could be best at, there's nothing. Are there any things we're quite good at? Yeah, there were a few things, but they weren't very sexy things. Like, I don't know, we're pretty good at chasing down invoices. I mean, it matters. It's not very sexy. So what we said was, well, if we could wave a magic wand and we could pick one thing right now that we'd be within our category, an advertising agency, that we'd be the best in London at, what would that one thing be?
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that should be winning pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an incredibly clarifying question to ask, because then what we did was we set about absolutely, totally, single-mindedly doing that. So, and if you're single-minded about something, something as important as that, it influenced just about every aspect of our business: who we hired, what kind of culture we'd have, what the building looked like, how we talked about ourselves, where we prioritized investment, a whole load of things. Decision. It clarifies a lot of decision making a long way down through the organization, and of course, and we did become incredibly good at new business. It's a game. We learned the rules. Like any game, if you learn the rules and you practice, you get better. And that's what we did. And to be honest with you, any agency, any consultancy business, any marketing services business, if I gave them one piece of advice, I would say the most important thing you need to be brilliant at is new business, because everything is easier than that. And in order to be the best, which is what we want to be, you only actually need to be able to do two things. The first is to be brilliant at new business, so win pitches, because it's the only route to growth. You don't get a lot of organic growth. Really, growth comes through winning pitches. And the other is happy clients. So if you have happy clients and you win pitches, that's it. That's all you need to do. You can work out for yourself what your routes to those things are going to be, what the role creativity, for example, plays in that, what the role strategy plays in that, what the role culture plays in that. You can work out your answers for yourself. But the hard metrics, happy clients, measure your clients' happiness and keep them happy, and win pitches, are going to be the best.
And of course, they are both measurable, aren't they? Which is quite
They
nice.
are
You can actually
very.
see your win rate
Yes.
going up or not, as the case
They're
may
hard
be.
metrics you can measure. You should be auditing your clients regularly, and we. Sorry, I could talk about new business all day long. I think an interesting measure that we started to think about with new business, and I introduced this at Havas as well. I had lots of businesses working for me, at all different levels of performance. And one of the metrics we started to look at in new business was how many pitches we said no to. Because what successful agencies do is they get more inquiries. But by definition, the better at it you are, the more inquiries you get. But you still usually can't do, if you're getting more than a certain number, you actually have to be quite disciplined about how many you're saying yes to, because the agencies, it's a bit like being a python, isn't it? And being an agency, you don't eat for ages, and then a big antelope comes along and you feel, oh my word, I've got to try and get it down me, because I don't know when the next meal's coming. Or maybe like a wolf is a better example. But what that means is agencies often try and eat too much all at once and actually lose them all. So
I've been there, taking on too many pitches, not being able to do them well, and then you go, why did we do that?
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of quite counterintuitive for us to start to ask a bit the agencies, okay, let's start to measure inquiries, of course, but let's also measure how many we say no to, just to see how that works. Anyway, there we go.
So you said something that I think is very, very powerful, and I want us to just dwell on that a little bit. You said culture is creating the conditions that allows you to outperform your competitors. And that feels like such an important statement. And I'm wondering how you do that and do it repeatedly. So you did it at this one agency, which had this open culture. You then went to another place and you created a different culture that allowed you to do the same. So how do you then take that as a concept and replicate it in multiple places? And as you said, at Havas, you were, you know, you were, you were leading multiple agencies, and every agency has its own culture. So how do you replicate that across multiple entities?
If it looks like I'm reading, I am reading because I've just because I've got the answer. I've got the answer. I've written a book about it. I just full disclosure. Well, so I thought about this. So first of all, I think I thought so. I've got a couple of answers to that. So the way we approached that, first of all, so let's say at Grey, which was the first agency that I was talking about. You know, we said it. We said that we had what, and I think we were when we took over quite a traditional business, and we had this, which is, by the way, I still think quite common in our industry, and by the way, quite common across many industries. We had this sort of very top-down, culture. Well, all cultures are top-down. We had a pyramidal, let's say, culture. And our view was that the behaviors that were in the business created what we called a dependent culture. And so by that, what I mean is you have a culture where people at the top make the majority of the decisions. Those decisions are made at the top and they are sort of filtered down through the organization. And my view then, my view now, is that dependent cultures essentially in the medium long term underperform, because really what you're doing is you've got this organization full of intelligent, highly motivated people, and you're saying to most of those people, you know what, it doesn't really matter what you think. Really it only matters what your elders and betters think, and they're going to tell you what to do. Will you just go away and do it, please? And I think advertising agencies or marketing services businesses have historically been particularly bad at that, if I'm really honest, but I think many other industries are pretty bad at it as well. So our view was, companies talk about, cliches like people are our most important asset. I mean, it's true, but it's a cliche because very few companies actually behave in a way that ensures that they make the most of that asset. So our view was, let's smash away the symbols and the mechanisms that create a dependent culture, basically. And that was the culture that we referred to as open. So I think the way of thinking about what real culture is in any organization, every team, by the way, every team, all the teams that you run, this applies as well, culture is best understood as the behavior of leadership. What leaders do and how they behave is the biggest determinant of what real culture in any organization and any team is. And I talk to people about culture a lot, and what I think a lot of people feel, I mean, a lot of, that's not that difficult a concept to understand, but I think what a lot of people do is they at the same time see culture as something that is somehow bigger than them. It's something that they know matters, and they are prepared to accept that, yes, it's about behaviors, but particularly in a big company, what can I do? Well, the fact of the matter is that in all organizations, they're actually made up of lots of cultures. There's not a single culture. I think I'm not picking on Publicis particularly, by that, but I heard the name Publicis. There will be a red thread that runs through the global culture with Publicis. But if you go to different Publicis offices, even in the same country, never mind different countries, the cultures are going to be different because the people are different and the leaders are different. So all of you that run teams, you are responsible for the culture in the team that you run. And the culture isn't something that's bigger than you. Culture is something that you shape every day through your behaviors in the teams that you run, first of all. The second thing that I think about culture, this is why I was fishing out my book, is that the more I think about culture, is I don't think that there are hundreds and hundreds of different ways of creating a great culture. I think all great cultures have more in common than they are different, irrespective of industry, irrespective of size. And I think you can go to different companies that have effective cultures, and they can outwardly appear different, but I think that those cultures share some commonalities. And so for me, those are things like trust. I think great cultures are high trust environments where we trust each other. And again, all of these are behaviors that work sort of horizontally and vertically through the organization. That's, we trust our peers, we trust our bosses and are trusted by our bosses, we trust the people that work for us and are trusted by the people that work for us. I think they are places where of safety and support. That seems, I think, maybe slightly I don't know, that maybe that seems strange language to some people, but I think they're places where, when we talk about maximizing the potential of the people within our teams, for us to be able to do that, people have to feel it's okay to make decisions that might not work out how you expect they're going to work out. I mean, basically getting stuff done is about making decisions. And if we don't make decisions, we don't get stuff done. And one of the reasons that we don't make decisions is because we fear them not working out. In effective cultures, you create an environment where people accept the absolute inevitability of things not working out how you want them to sometimes. Sorry, Vonnie.
You're describing psychological. Yeah, you're describing psychological safety very, very well, because it's and organisations that exhibit safety in that way are more successful, because people are allowed to be more creative and more resourceful, and they're allowed to have ideas, and they're not inhibited, and they're not living in fear of the consequences of a poor decision made with good intention. So absolutely right. I think that's absolutely what I mean. I would agree with that. So yes. So I mean, listen, I said earlier, I'm just going to come back to the group, because I know there's over 100 people in here, which is actually fantastic. And I want to know whether any of you have any difficult or easy questions that you would like to put to Chris or I, because I extended that invitation at the beginning, and we've got a few minutes left. So I'm going to invite you to put any questions into the chat, and we will come to as many of them as possible. So please don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you, because hearing from us is all very well, but there's lots of brilliant people in here. And we'd love to hear whether what we've said has resonated, whether you have any questions on culture, talent, growth, or anything else leadership related. So please do post something in the chat. And if you don't, I'll have to ask Chris more questions, and he'll have to talk some more. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. And while you do that, I'm just going to say a few more things about the course before we get to questions. So what people leave the course with is a better sense of what good leadership is, and maybe also what it isn't. But they also leave with some very practical tools that they can put into practice and use, from that minute. And I hope that they also leave with an ability to make clear decisions. And this thing about getting stuff done is about making decisions. It's about making lots of decisions every single day. So that bias towards action is something that we talk about and promote very, very heavily in the course. I want to say that investing in yourselves and your leadership is an important investment, because it's investing in your own culture and your own development, and it allows you to control and accelerate your career. So very, very important. Now, I see questions have popped up, so I'm going to go to those, and then I'll come back to a summing up at the end. So question here: how do you manage sideways someone who likes to control and doesn't trust, which negatively affects culture and talent? Interesting. So a peer. This is a peer maybe who controls and doesn't trust, and that impacts everyone around them.
I think that's actually a great question, because I think in some ways peers until you asked it, it hadn't occurred to me, but I think perhaps peers are the hardest people to manage in that regard, because you have a formal relationship with your boss. You should do an organizational relationship. You have a formal relationship with the people that work for you, but you kind of often don't have a formal relationship with a peer. You have an informal relationship formed within a team. How do you manage somebody so it's essentially somebody you have no direct control over? I think the truth is, if it's somebody that you have no direct control over and no formal relationship with, I think that's a very difficult thing to do, if I'm honest. I don't know. If this is somebody, I suppose my answer would be, if it's somebody, two extremes, somebody that you have a lot of interactions with at one end of the spectrum, I think that I only have two suggestions, really. The first is that you have a conversation with that person with a view to finding ways to improve your personal relationship before you get into all of their myriad of flaws and faults, which is going to cause conflict and probably isn't going to solve anything. You might be able to make progress first and foremost on an interpersonal level. That is how you feel about that person. Therefore, how can you find ways to build a more effective relationship with them and that is about communication. That's one of interestingly, the next thing on my list of universal behaviors of great cultures is communication. To be great communicators. I think at the other end of the spectrum, if it's somebody who you have intermittent interaction with, ignore it. That's the best, work around it. I think some people are like rocks in a stream. You just have to flow around them. If it's terrible, you might have to talk to your boss. If that person is really, really smashing things up, you need to talk to your boss. Vonnie, you're the coach. What would you suggest?
I'm gonna give you a couple of thoughts. I would say two ideas maybe. One is I would have a quiet conversation with them, and you have to do this quite carefully. So you have to come at it from your perspective rather than what they're doing. So you could say something like, when this happens, this is how I experience it, and this is how it affects me. And I wanted to bring it to your attention because I'd like to know. Or you could say, this is how it's affecting my team, or whatever it is, however it's manifesting. But there is nothing accusatory about what you say. You bring your story, and you ask for their input into that story. And you say, look, I understand that this is just my perspective, and I want to hear it from your point of view. And I'm hoping that we can solve this together. So what you end up doing is getting their buy-in to the problem that you're presenting as yours. You get their perspective, and then together you come up with a way forward that is different to the current state. That's one thing, and that's I call that, it's like a reverse coaching conversation. You bring them your problem, as though it was your problem, but it's actually coming from them. But you don't present it as an accusation, because they'll just get defensive, and then you end up in we're not having a conversation, we're having a battle. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I would look at one of the things that we talk about in the course is that values are the behaviors of the organization and of leadership. And if you have a clear set of values and behaviors that go with those values, the behaviors are far more important than the value sort of definitions themselves. I would look at how at odds or congruent with those values these behaviors are. And if they're not, then that's probably some work you need to do as an organization around what is an acceptable behavior and what isn't. And often people come up with their values, but don't really drill down into that level of detail. So those are two ideas. There are others, but those are two ideas that you could use. I'm going to move on to another question because we've got a couple of others in. Hang on. How do you manage people who you'll consider dinosaurs in an organization and grossly averse to change, and getting them towards more progressive ways of doing things?
Well, a big question there for me is what your organizational relationship with that person is, for starters. I mean, if that person works for you, then I think that's a classic kind of management task, if you like. I mean, you sort of do, I guess, a version of what Vonnie talked about, but in that instance, you're their boss. So at the end of the day, you can impose that upon them. If that ultimately, I think, if people, I think a culture is as strong as its weakest link. This is we've talked about three characters: safety, trust, communication. We talked about those three universal characteristics of great cultures. The fourth, I think, is that they are consistent. The same rules apply to everybody through the organization, from bottom to top, from left to right. Now, I'm kind of guessing perhaps that person doesn't work for you, which is a more difficult situation. I think if you're in an organization with, I mean, Vonnie, again, maybe you're better placed to answer this than me. If you're working in an organization with a senior person who you consider to be a dinosaur, and you can have really limited direct influence over that person's behavior, then strangely enough, this isn't a plug, but I'm actually racing to a deadline to finish my latest book, which is one of the chapters of which is to how you deal with exactly situation. Well, basically how you deal with situations like that. And in fact, there is a very final piece in the program where we talk about leading from the middle and how you deal with working in an imperfect working environments, because in reality, all of us work in imperfect working environments. I think that, I'll shut up in a minute, Vonnie, but I think a lot of the principles that Vonnie talked about in terms of dealing with, challenges with people who don't work for you apply in this situation as well. I think eventually you get to a point in any culture where if you try everything, and that culture ultimately is a culture that makes you unhappy, or you feel like you're not fulfilling your potential, or any of those other things, ultimately you might have to go and work somewhere else, because there are in any organization going to be people over whom you frankly you can't change their behavior. If you're talking about a boss who's a long way above you, it's difficult. Do you think that's an
There's a further comment. There's a further comment, which is you lead the dinosaurs. So I would say regarding change, because this is, I think, a very human response to change. There are some people who embrace it very readily. They are few and far between. There are some who resist it because they like to hold with traditions and what they know, and they don't like the uncertainty and unpredictability of change. So they resist it quite firmly. And then there's some people in the middle who will sort of follow along at a pace. So I think you're talking about the hardened resistors of change. And I think I would focus less on them and focus on the ones who are, as I refer to it, kind of happy to leap over the sort of the change point. I would focus on those and the mass that's coming behind them. And the dinosaurs will very quickly feel A, outnumbered, and B, left behind if they're not adhering to new ways of doing things or to whatever it is that you're introducing. And then, you and they have a choice about whether they are useful to retain in the team. And that's tough decisions sometimes, but I think necessary. But I think you give them every chance to go through the change process at their own pace. You recognize that they struggle with the change. You acknowledge it. But change, not changing is not an option. And you make that very clear as well. So they can take a little bit more time than everyone else, but they're going to have to get there. And then you make a decision that's, the right decision for your business. I'm going to take one more question. I'm so sorry. We've got loads of questions and I'd love to do all of them. I'm going to take one more question and then we'll sort of wrap up, because I want to make sure that you will leave on time when we get back to our days or evenings or wherever you are in the day. So let's have a look at this one. How do you balance between a culture of free reign and having order and discipline?
I think great cultures have order and discipline. That's my simple answer to that. Great cultures aren't sort of chaotic at all. Not at all. Discipline, being disciplined, is a really important characteristic of an effective culture. What an effective culture does is it says these are the behaviours that we think matter to us, and Vonnie and I have sort of talked about some of the things that we believe those are. I believe are universal for great cultures. I'm not saying they're the only ones. I'm also prepared for people to challenge me on that. But I think trust, safety, great communication, being consistent top to bottom, holding each other to account if we fall short, because of course we're all humans. We all fall short all the time. I mean, that's just the human condition. But I don't think that it's about being disorganized, and it's not about being chaotic. It's about creating a set of behaviors that we as a group, as a culture, think will enable us to individually and therefore collectively be able to perform at our best able to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. I think a lot of the best cultures do two things. First of all, they are explicit about what those are, those behaviors and behaviors, yes, are. So we called, like, to go back to the grey example, we called ours open. We gave it a name so everybody could understand what that was. And then, of course, as from management down, you have to then walk the walk and follow those behaviors. Now, what's interesting, however, I think it is an interesting question, however, because when we had a nice top-down, people at the top told the people what to do, but at the bottom what to do, it did in some ways feel safer organizationally, certainly for the people at the top. I mean, the people at the top felt safer because they were telling everybody what to do. And when we first set about change, we really were quite iconoclastic, and we said to ourselves, we're going to change as many things as we possibly can, almost sort of bloody-mindedly. We're just going to change everything because we want to shed that skin. Now, what happened was we discovered that some of those things that we changed were a really bad idea to change. We were like, oh, hang on, we know why we always did it like that. Quick, go back. And we changed track. So again, I think that ties into that decision-making thing a little bit as well, which is we felt on balance from where, I don't think this applies to every situation, but we felt, given that we were already a broken business, on balance, we had relatively little to lose by sort of perhaps going a bit faster than felt comfortable. That isn't the right application to every situation everywhere. But the answer, I think a lot of bosses think that giving people greater autonomy is a recipe for disorder, and it really isn't. It really isn't. It's, giving people greater autonomy and greater control over how they work is the most potent way to get your team and your business to begin to accelerate its progress. And we know that because all we've got to do is think about how we as individuals would feel were that us. If we had a boss that said, we are going to give you more autonomy and more control over how you work, how would you feel about that? And everybody would say yes. And everybody, really importantly, would feel less stressed. Not no stress, but less stress. Joanna's just reappeared. I think that's probably like, is that like the time?
That's your cue.
Is that
That's
like
your
the
cue.
It's what we do at the end of chemistry.
So I'm going to just say a couple of things before we sign off. First of all, we're asking you for your feedback. There's a Survey Monkey link that's just popped up in the chat. Please give us your feedback. It's really useful to us. I'm really sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but I'm so happy that you threw them at us. I wish we'd had more time. And ideally, if you come on the course, maybe we'll answer some of those questions. So that's a little plug. Second little plug is we are offering a discount for people who sign up to the course by the 29th of February. There is a code, and we will send it on to all of you after this session. So please think about signing up to the course. There is so much good stuff to learn in there, and you will find it really useful and really practical. I promise you that. And thank you so much for giving us your attention for this hour. It's been really wonderful to have so many of you here, and hopefully see you on the course very soon. I'm going to hand back to Joanna. She can bring us to a close.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Bonnie. It's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed it, and I must say I've been very interested in the questions. And as you saw, we have recorded it, so it will be available to the people who were on it and others who didn't have the time to join it today. Let's see what happens, and I hope as many as possible. And thank you. I didn't know about the discount idea. That's lovely. Nice surprise. And yes, hope let's see how many sign up and enjoy it. But even if they don't, they've learned something from you both today, and I'm very grateful for the hour that you spent with us. It's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joanna.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Cheerio.
Thank you. Bye.